Well, it's a pleasure to be with you on this Palm Sunday morning in a new and different way. Have you ever wondered what exactly was happening on the first Palm Sunday so long ago? Have you ever wondered why Jesus would ride into Jerusalem on a donkey? Why people were cheering, or even who was cheering? Perhaps like you, I've long understood this story to be that the crowds along the way to Jerusalem had heard of Jesus, and so were so excited at his arrival that they couldn't hold back, forming the first century version of a ticker-tape parade. Tom Brady is not so popular around here today, but a few years ago he was. And I often imagined Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem being similar to a Patriots duck boat parade after winning the Super Bowl. But after hearing our first reading from Zechariah, it's clear that Jesus was enacting the event described by the prophet, and likely with those whose lives had been transformed by his ministry, the ones cheering him on. Blind men who had regained their sight, lepers made clean, Mary Magdalene freed from her demons, people of various backgrounds and afflictions made whole by this amazing Jesus. Peasants and lepers, prostitutes, fishermen, day laborers, and tax collectors, all together. Likely a very motley and unkempt crowd. People who must have seemed even more motley and unkempt in contrast with Jerusalem's posh elite. And if you think of it that way, it was probably less like a Patriots parade and more like a civil rights march, or a Labor Day march, or even a gay pride march, back when these were all still challenging, uncomfortable, and radical, before politicians and celebrities and bank presidents started taking part. These disciples, these followers of Jesus, were marching, processing, perhaps even demonstrating. They gathered and shouted and proclaimed that in Jesus, in their own healed selves, God's kingdom had come near. That God had touched and healed and fed and taught them. They who were the lowliest, the scruffiest, and the least well off. They announced that God's kingdom was lived, embodied, and expressed in them. And most especially in this man, Jesus, the prophet, not from the mighty city Jerusalem, not from God's city, but from the lowliest places, Nazareth in Galilee, a village of just 300 people. And so as I picture it, once they start cheering and waving palms, others come out to see just who this celebrity was in their midst. Obviously, those posh Jerusalemites didn't recognize Jesus. There was no social media back then, no Facebook or Instagram, no 24-hour cable news, not even a newspaper. For the vast majority of those in the crowd, Jesus was probably just a hot new celebrity, one whose fame wouldn't last, maybe even one on whom the crowds could turn. Sort of like a former football hero who's moved to Florida. But for others, Jesus was the manifestation of new life, their new life. He was new and even defiant in the face of death. And of course, it was that defiance that ultimately led Jesus to the cross. since he would not back down. He would not go away, and he would not be quiet. It's no surprise that the Jerusalem crowds, and especially the forces of power, would seek to put an end to these marchers' silly parade before any of the locals started thinking that they too might join a ridiculous but growing movement. Jerusalem was a tense place then. A delicate peace had been established between the Jewish religious leaders and the Roman Empire. It wasn't an easy peace to maintain. If people living in less than ideal conditions were to join up, thinking that they too might want to follow this peasant Messiah, well, then the whole delicate balance would fall apart. So as insignificant as he probably was, this Jesus, this radical, had to be stopped. His march, his procession, his spiritual revolution ended once for all on the cross of Golgotha. But what those powers had not remembered is that you can't kill God. Not really, not truly, and not forever. Because God's power is too great. Because God's love is too strong. And we here today in the church and at home and around the world, like those marchers on the first Palm Sunday so long ago, we are witnesses to that fact. We are witnesses to the power of love, the power of hope, and the power of life. We are witnesses to the power of a God who will not allow fear and death to have the last word. For 2,000 years, people around the world and right here in this church, ordinary people, sometimes even unkempt and a little scruffy, people can testify to the fact that God is taking the broken pieces of our lives and transforming them into something new, something real, something alive. God is taking pain and death and turning them into joy and life. Easter Day, April 4th, will mark the 53rd anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And like Jesus, Dr. King was defiant in the face of death. He saw cheering crowds, and he challenged governments, and he was killed by the powers of evil. But those powers could not silence him, nor rob those touched by him of the dream, the vision of a new and better way to live. Of course, Dr. King's vision and his dream was really Jesus' vision and Jesus' dream. And so I'd like to share some of Martin Luther King's Palm Sunday sermon, which was delivered in 1957. He has much to teach us in our own time as we too defiantly choose life and the power of God. Dr. King preached, "Are you standing amid trials and tribulations? Well, God is the answer. Are you disappointed with something about life? God is the answer. Are you standing amid some experience that seems so dark that you will never get through? God is the answer. Are you looking for some way to run through the streets of life and remain calm amid war? Well, God is the answer. Now you've got to learn that, my friends. And when you learn that, you can stand up amid any condition because you know that God is with you no matter what happens. You can stand up amid despair. You can stand up amid persecution. You can stand up even amid death. But you don't worry because you know God is with you. Wherever he leads me, Dr. King says, I will follow. I will follow him to the garden. I will follow him to the cross if he wants me to go there. I will follow him to the dark valleys of death if he wants me to go there. Even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you know that God is there. And then he says, it's dark down here. Tired sometimes, disappointing experiences all around, sickness, facing the death of loved ones, facing disappointment, highest dreams often shattered, highest hopes often blasted. And yet somehow, God has given us a way to live. While others all around fall down in despair, even suicide, even death, we keep going. We keep singing. Well, that was Dr. King's message over 60 years ago. And it was Jesus' message much longer ago than that. And I think it's a message we need today. Cheering crowds and moments of earthly triumph are great when they come. And doubtless that first Palm Sunday was exhilarating too. But ultimately, those moments are meaningless. What has meaning and what gives strength is life in and with God. Life that is defined in the midst of illness and death. Life that is not afraid of powers and principalities. Life that gives sight to the blind, heals the brokenhearted, and ultimately leads from waving palms to the desolation of the cross, and finally to the empty tomb, bathed in the light, in the bright light of a new day. Together, we will reach that bright new day. Together, we will live, defiant, transformed, and with God. To whom be the glory, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.